3 years ago, I got invited over there to go to a kickboxing event in Moscow. And I thought, well, I've never been there, so I'd like to go over there.
March 10th, 2026. It started like any other post. A short video, bright sunlight, a calm, almost peaceful setting in Hawaii. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the location. It was the man standing in the center of the frame. At 86 years old, Chuck Norris didn't look like someone slowing down. Behind him, a younger fighter moved quickly, throwing strikes, staying sharp. In front of him, Norris stood relaxed, steady, completely in control. There was no hesitation in his posture, no visible sign of weakness. Then he looked directly into the camera, and with a small smile, he sent something that instantly spread across the internet. "I don't age. I level up." It felt like more than just a line. Within hours, the video exploded. Millions watched it. Comments flooded in from every corner of the world. Some laughed, repeating the long-running jokes about Chuck Norris being unstoppable. Others admired him, genuinely inspired by how someone his age could still move, still train, still project that level of confidence. But underneath all of it, there was something deeper. People didn't just see strength, they saw proof. Proof that maybe, just maybe, he really was different. For decades, the internet had turned Chuck Norris into something larger than life, a symbol, a myth, a man who didn't follow the same rules as everyone else. And in that moment, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt real. Then, 9 days later, everything stopped. There was no build-up, no warning signs, no rumors leading up to it. Just a statement, short, direct, final. The Norris family confirmed that Chuck Norris had passed away. Suddenly, unexpectedly, no long illness, no public struggle, no final goodbye. The same man who had just appeared strong, active, and fully alive was gone. He was 86 years old, and the timing made it even harder to process. Just days earlier, the world had watched him smile into a camera, standing tall under the sun. Now, that same world was trying to understand how everything could change so quickly. At first, some people didn't believe it, because this wasn't the first time. For years, decades even, false reports of his death had circulated online. Headlines would appear, spread rapidly, and then disappear just as quickly when proven untrue. It had become a pattern. So when this news broke, many assumed it was just another hoax, another rumor, another mistake. But this time, it wasn't. This time, it was confirmed. And the reaction was unlike anything anyone expected. The internet didn't erupt. It didn't spiral into chaos. It went quiet. Not completely silent, but different. Heavier. Because beneath all the jokes, beneath all the exaggerated stories and memes, there had always been an unspoken belief attached to his name. Not that he was literally immortal, but that he represented something that didn't fade. Endurance. Discipline. The idea that no matter how hard life hit you, you kept going. Chuck Norris wasn't just a person to many people. He was proof that strength could last, that resilience could define a life. And now, that idea was being challenged. So naturally, the questions started to surface. What actually happened in those final days? Was there something hidden behind that last video? Something the public didn't see? And more importantly, who was Chuck Norris before all of this? Before the fame, before the films, before the legend. To understand that, you have to go all the way back. Back to a place where nothing about his life suggested greatness. Ryan, Oklahoma. A small town. Quiet. Isolated. The kind of place where life moved slowly, and opportunities were limited. That's where Carlos Ray Norris was born on March 10th, 1940. There were no cameras waiting for him there. No expectations that he would one day become a global icon. Just a young boy growing up in a family already struggling to hold itself together. His father, Ray Norris, had served in World War II. But like many who returned from war, he didn't come back the same. The scars weren't always visible, but they were there. Alcohol became a constant part of his life, and with it came instability. He was present at times, but emotionally distant, unpredictable, inconsistent. For a young child, that kind of environment leaves an impact. But if his father represented chaos, his mother represented something else entirely. Strength, faith, endurance. Wilma Norris raised her children under difficult circumstances, often with very little to work with. Money was tight, stability was fragile, but she refused to let everything fall apart. She held the family together, quietly, relentlessly. Eventually the marriage ended, and with that came more change, more uncertainty. Carlos and his brothers moved with their mother, first to Kansas, then later to California. Each move meant starting over. New surroundings, new schools, no real sense of permanence. And for Carlos, it meant becoming even more withdrawn. He wasn't outgoing. He wasn't confident. In fact, he was the opposite. Shy, quiet, almost invisible. He struggled with a stutter that made speaking difficult, especially in front of others. Simple conversations could feel overwhelming. Attention wasn't something he wanted. It was something he avoided. He wasn't a fighter. Not even close. Years later, he would openly admit that as a child, he was afraid of confrontation, afraid of conflict, afraid of standing out. Which makes what happened next even more important. Because in 1958, at just 18 years old, Carlos made a decision that would change everything. He joined the United States Air Force. Not because he was chasing a dream, but because he was trying to escape. Escape poverty, escape uncertainty, escape the fear that his future might look exactly like his past. The military sent him far from home, to South Korea. And it was there, thousands of miles away from everything familiar, that something unexpected happened. He found martial arts. At first it wasn't part of some grand plan. It was simply something he encountered, something that caught his interest. But over time, it became something much more powerful. Martial arts gave him structure, discipline, focus. For the first time in his life, he had something that demanded consistency and rewarded effort. It wasn't about fighting others. It was about mastering himself. Training required patience, control, presence, and slowly those qualities began to take root. He trained relentlessly, day after day, hour after hour. He earned his black belt, and more importantly, he began to change. The shy, uncertain boy who avoided attention was starting to develop confidence. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, but something steady, something internal. By the time he returned to the United States in 1962, he wasn't the same person who had left. He hadn't become a legend, not yet. But he had found direction, and sometimes that's where everything begins. When Carlos Ray Norris returned to the United States in 1962, he carried something invisible but powerful: discipline. For the first time in his life, he wasn't drifting. He had direction. But direction doesn't guarantee success. Back in California, reality set in quickly. He applied for a job in law enforcement, hoping to build a stable career. It didn't work out. The opportunity never came, and once again, he found himself standing at a crossroads. This time, though, he didn't retreat. He adapted. Instead of waiting for a path to open, he created one. He opened a small martial arts studio. It wasn't impressive. No spotlight, no recognition. Just a modest space where he began teaching what he had learned overseas. At the same time, he stepped into competition. And at first, he struggled. He lost matches, faced fighters who were faster, sharper, more experienced. Each defeat could have been a reason to quit. Years earlier, it probably would have been, but something had changed. He kept going, refining his technique, studying his mistakes, returning stronger each time, and slowly the results began to shift. Wins replaced losses. Confidence replaced doubt. By the late 1960s, he wasn't just competing, he was dominating. He won multiple championships, defeated top-ranked opponents, established himself as one of the most formidable martial artists in the United States. The same boy who once avoided confrontation had now built a career around facing it head-on. But even that wasn't the final destination, because another door was about to open, one that would take him far beyond the world of competition. Hollywood. At the time, it wasn't a welcoming place for someone like him. He wasn't an actor. He didn't have connections. He didn't fit the traditional mold of a film star. But sometimes, one encounter can change everything. And for Norris, that moment came through a man who was already beginning to reshape cinema itself. Bruce Lee. Their connection started through martial arts circles in Los Angeles. What began as curiosity quickly turned into mutual respect. They trained together, pushed each other, shared a deep understanding of discipline that few people outside that world could fully grasp. Then came the opportunity that would introduce Norris to a global audience. In 1972, he was offered a role in Way of the Dragon. He played Colt, the opponent who would face Bruce Lee in what would become one of the most iconic fight scenes in film history. The setting was simple: the Roman Colosseum. No distractions, no shortcuts, just two fighters. That scene didn't just showcase physical skill. It created something memorable, something lasting. For many viewers, it was their first introduction to Chuck Norris, and it wouldn't be the last. From there, his career expanded. He transitioned into acting, building a presence in action films throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Movies like Good Guys Wear Black, Missing in Action, and The Delta Force helped establish his on-screen identity. Strong, disciplined, relentless. But unlike many action stars, his persona didn't feel manufactured. It felt earned, because behind every role was a real history of struggle, training, and persistence. Over time, he became more than just a film actor. He became a symbol, a representation of toughness, not just physical, but mental. Then, in the 1990s, his influence reached an even wider audience through television. Walker, Texas Ranger. The show ran for years, bringing his image into homes around the world. For many, this was the version of Chuck Norris they grew up watching. The calm, controlled figure who always stood for justice, who never backed down, who always endured. And somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. The internet turned him into a legend. Not just a respected figure, but a phenomenon. Chuck Norris facts. Exaggerated. Absurd. Impossible. Jokes that painted him as invincible, unstoppable, beyond human limitations. And what made it unique was this: he embraced it. Instead of rejecting the jokes, he allowed them to exist, understanding that they reflected something deeper. People didn't just admire strength, they admired resilience. And he had spent his entire life embodying it. But behind the image, there was still a man, a husband, a father, someone who faced real challenges, just like anyone else. Which brings everything back to those final days. March 2026. The video in Hawaii. The energy, the confidence, the smile. There were no visible signs that anything was wrong. No indication that this would be the last time the world would see him like that. And that's what made the news so difficult to process, because it didn't follow the expected pattern. There was no long public decline, no gradual farewell, just a sudden ending. As of now, there has been no widely confirmed public detail explaining a prolonged illness leading up to his passing. And that absence of information has only deepened the mystery surrounding those final days. What can be said with certainty is this: he lived a life defined by transformation. From a quiet, insecure child, to a disciplined martial artist, to a world-renowned actor, to a cultural icon. Every stage of his life was built, not given, earned through persistence, through refusal to quit. And that is why his passing feels different to so many people. Because the idea he represented doesn't disappear the same way a person does. The man may be gone, but the image, the meaning behind it remains. Not because of internet jokes, not because of exaggerated stories, but because of something much simpler. He proved that change is possible, that strength can be built, that even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to something extraordinary. And maybe that's the real reason the world paused when he was gone. Not because he was invincible, but because he showed what it looks like to keep going, no matter what.